Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today, I wanted to share some channelings from Quo that deal with the will and their interpretation of music and the sensitivity of the body and a whole other variety of issues. But these are some great channelings given around Christmas time of 2010. They begin by saying, tonight we're going to take questions from those who are assembled in our meditation circle. There are questions on how Quo enjoys music, having a very sensitive physical body, and why one would choose that seeing after images solar flares, and why we would be feeling tired all the time. Quo, if anybody is first coming to this video, is a social memory complex that's channeled by a group called LL Research. This social memory complex is made up of a number of entities from higher densities, at least that's what they claim, and they answer questions in meditation circle, and some of the insights they have are wonderful. Carla begins by channeling, "We are those known to you as the principle of Quo. We greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator in whose name we come to you this evening. We thank you for the privilege and the pleasure of being called to your circle of seeking and are glad to join your session of working for questions. But before we ask for the first query, we would, as always, ask of each of those who hears or reads these words that you exercise the discrimination and discernment that you have within you, so that you take up those thoughts of ours which seem fair to you, but you leave the rest behind. We greatly appreciate this, for it enables us to speak without being concerned that we might infringe upon your free will or interrupt the rhythm of your spiritual walk. We will surprise this instrument by responding to a query that she had within her mind. As she was listening to the tuning song before this session, she was wondering if we appreciated the music that you hear in your third density world. We may say, my sister, we do indeed enjoy the music that we hear. But we hear more music than you do because we hear the melodies of your blended auras. We hear the tunes of your dreams and your hopes, and everything that makes you special and unique. We hear the harmonics of your planet and space, and all the other stars as well, and the sound they make, the music of the spheres as it is called. We hear music everywhere. It is a much more musical environment for us than for you, for we are able to hear the inner music, the inner harmonics of the energies and essences that make each of us and each of you and all of the creation of the Father together, and so we hear the creation sing. We do enjoy every sort of creative music, every written song, every composed melody, and we hear and appreciate as well the music that you do not know, that you are making yet. You are making it, and making it beautifully. We thank this instrument for caring about us, as we are intangible, yet it is a very sweet thing to be loved and remembered even by those who are unable to see us. Yet we know that you feel us and hear us, and we appreciate that tremendously. May we ask at this time if there is an opening question? Quo, I have a two-part question. If a person has an extremely sensitive physical body, is this usually directly related to the state of the energy or spiritual body? And in either case, why might a person choose to adopt this level of sensitivity during an incarnation? We are those of Quo, and we understand the query of the one known as L, and are glad to respond. My sister, there are many reasons that an entity may be sensitive. However, in the majority of cases where there is an overriding sensitivity of the physical body on the level of an entity of the healing persuasion, saying that you, at one time or another, that perhaps you are allergic to the planet. In such cases, it is chosen to have a super-sensitive physical vehicle in order that the energy body might stay at a tuning which is not convenient for those of the normal sensitivities upon third-density planets such as Earth. This instrument, for instance, is often known to say that she feels that the hypersensitive physical vehicle that she is connected with her ability to channel. If you will think of wiring and how wiring works, you can see that a wiring that would be especially effective in inner planes or time-space work, such as healing, teaching, or channeling, the ability to clear the, shall we say, miasma of heavy planetary energies, would enable such an instrument to have a more clarified and accurate contact with conceptual communication, which would offer the possibility of bringing through information that may be helpful to spiritual seekers. That is, this instrument's rationale and, as she would say, her story. You may try that on to see how well it fits your situation. In general, a hypersensitive physical vehicle tends to be evidence of a person's coming from elsewhere, so that this planet is not the planet of origin. This planet is not the vibration or the frequency which has been experienced as an ongoing state, but rather there has been experience in other densities, in other environments that are more comfortably accommodating of the sensitivities involved in an entity's energy body, so that such an entity can know that he or she has made a significant sacrifice and has chosen willingly and in full knowledge ahead of time to enter into the miasma of what this instrument would call the world of Maya, the Earth atmosphere, the heavy chemical atmosphere of planet Earth, in order to serve the infinite creator by serving others. Now, we are not suggesting that everyone who has a hypersensitive vehicle is destined to be or should be a channel, a healer, or a teacher. Many wanderers have chosen to come to the earth plane at this time simply to hold the light. That is to say, not necessarily to hold the light, but to hold a place where the Creator's light may shine through. This is a counter to the work ethic of your culture. It is seemingly obvious to casual thinking that entities who come from other densities to the earth density to serve are coming to serve in an outer sense. But my sister, this is often not the case. Indeed, the majority of those who come from elsewhere to planet Earth come to lighten the consciousness of planet Earth by holding their hearts open and allowing the love light of the one infinite creator to move through their energy bodies into their hearts. And when their hearts are fully open, they are able to bless that energy and send it onwards, not only with the infinity of the creator's light, but also with the very specific blessing of one spark of the creator, which is that wanderer on earth. As that wanderer moves through all which it must move in order to keep the heart open and to bless that light and dedicate it to the service of the entire planet, that wanderer is fulfilling his purpose completely. We say this because we wish to loosen the bonds of your cultural preference for doing over being. There is a tremendous amount of light that is being given into the earth plane at this time by wanderers who have awakened to their purpose and who realize that they are here as citizens of eternity and citizens of earth all at the same time, to be that union between the finite and the infinite that is able to bring infinite energy and blessing into the finite circumstance. All wanderers come to lighten the darkness. Some come for other work as well. So it is unknown to us, without probing further as to what any wanderer's particular chosen work before incarnation might be. But it is known to us that all entities of whatever origin have one basic purpose, and that is to love, to seek, and to share the love and the light of the one infinite creator. May we answer your questions further, my sister? Yes, Quo, if a person has an extremely sensitive spiritual body, such as being psychic, being able to see apparitions and behold things that aren't physically noticeable to other people, what generally would be the purpose of that kind of adaptation? Is that a thing that just happens at random, or is it chosen? Are you just born with the indigo ray open? Do you have anything you could say about that? We are those of Quo, and are aware of your query, my sister. We are glad to speak to the limit of our ability and to respect your free will, and will gladly do so. There are times, my sister, when the best laid plans, to quote the one known as Bobby, go wrong. The plan is seldom to place one in more confusion than one experiences as a normal state of existence on planet Earth. However, there is such a thing as unrealistic optimism, shall we say, and we find that many wanderers are those who come into the incarnation having chosen to retain enough of a good contact with the inner planes that there can be what you might call illnesses or difficult conditions that strike, just as a cold or a sinus infection might hit the physical vehicle. So there are times when the energy body experiences colds or fevers or periods or there has been some slight injury to the basic wiring, shall we say, of the energy body. This is not to say this is a serious illness or serious condition of which we are speaking, not something that would cause the energy body to stop working or to sever the silver cord, as this instrument calls it, but to say that there are surprises. This instrument's surprises came because there was so much emphasis on keeping higher density wiring. It was unseen by this instrument before incarnation that this would leave the physical vehicle vulnerable to physical illnesses. In just the same way, some may find their wiring, as this instrument would call it, creates for them times of intense sensitivity to the energies of the inner planes that are directly contiguous to or attracted to the energy body. And it is just like a physical illness, quite distracting, and is a kind of discomfort that must be managed. The one known as L was speaking earlier of learning more information from a channeled source known as Seth, as to how these levels of thought forms and energetic essences can occur and can be attracted to or be part of the experience of a sensitive entity. We are grateful that the one known as L has run into this material and other sources of material that, regardless of whether their origin is in dreams, in reading, in visions, or in the simple intuitions and insights of the inner life, and has found these to be good resources in dealing with a continuing tendency towards having information which is not immediately helpful coming into the system. In a normal person, it would be as if that person might suddenly start receiving a radio station somewhere inside the head, and all of a sudden there would be a source of information that was unknown. What does one do with that? What is that for? Well, as for that person is concerned, that person would be interested in turning it off, in finding out which tooth it is that has somehow picked up radio station 99.7 and removing that tooth. And yet, at the same time, all information has its place if it is good information. So whenever there is a source of information that seems to be exterior to the normal experience of those upon planet Earth, then we would ask the entity experiencing that extra information to evaluate it. Is it a signal? Is it good information, or is it noise? Is it static on the line? The treatment for good information is to pay more attention to it. And, as the one known as L has said this evening, the treatment for bad information is to pay less attention to it. We do not say bad information to indicate in any way that it is evil information. We use the term to differentiate between signal and noise, useful information and static or non-useful information. So we would ask the one known as L to employ her discrimination and her discernment and favor the good information while serenely moving away from and turning down and allowing to go away the experience of static on the line. We realize, my sister, that this is a simplistic discussion on our part, and that there are subtleties to evaluating information that are not easily addressed by words, and we trust that you will understand that which we cannot say, for there are no words to evaluate the essences that are beyond words, as useful and non-useful, as well as simply those voices that speak in words. We thank the one known as L for this query, and we would ask if there is a follow-up. Quo, I have another related question if no one else has one. For a couple of years now, I have a hard time putting this into words. I've seen after images, such as if I look at a red bow, I'll see a transparent green bow next to it. Occasionally that image will float away or do something else. Occasionally things change colors randomly. The sky will turn purple, or the pages in a book will turn yellow. There seems to just be colors floating around everything. But mainly it's just the after images. I realize that the image I'm seeing is the after image of the object I'm looking at. It's becoming so that I see that all the time. I was wondering if there is any spiritual significance to that, or if that is just a problem with my vision. We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my sister. My sister, we find that it does not infringe upon free will in your case to state that there is not the spiritual aspect to this phenomenon in your experience. Rather, it is the result of having sensitivity to light and having eyesight that your ophthalmologist would call weak, so that when the eye is slightly out of focus, which occurs more and more as one becomes more tired, there is an increasing amount of this kind of experience. And even when one is completely alert and well rested, there is the tendency to see these effects. It is a function of the distortions of the eyes rather than having a spiritual significance. Question: love and light to you, known as quote, I do have a question regarding our sun, the star sun. There has been some activity of fleets or crafts in and around our sun in the month of November, and I was curious if you were aware of them, and if so, if there's anything you can tell us about that. We are those of Quo, my sister, and aware of your query. My sister, your sun is evolving, and while the flares and seemingly other toxic activities have been seemingly quite active within your past days, we find that the orb itself, known as sun or soul, is healthy and making adjustments which are part of its evolution. It shines upon all densities in time and space, but the active density for space-time is rapidly evolving into fourth density instead of third density. This calls forth from the sun light of a much denser quality. This light has more facets to the photon. It holds much more information and is much richer in its light that would even be considered toxic to third density entities, but which for fourth density entities and above is fully acceptable. Therefore, for us to evaluate it from our point of view, we would simply say that your sun is evolving as it should, and as it must, as it moves through its densities in this octave of evolution. From your point of view, however, it is certainly alarming to see the activity change upon your sun, and we would simply say that the more that one is able to live by fourth density values, such as compassion, understanding, forgiveness, and open-hearted love, the more the physical vehicles connected with each of you will be able to more sturdily deal with the qualities of the light of your sun as time goes on. Quote, not only I, but numerous people I've talked to, especially among the spiritual seekers, have talked about feeling very tired, very drained on all levels lately, and experiencing an increasing growing sense of weariness and exhaustion. I've wondered if that had anything to do with the coming harvest and the shifting energies. We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my sister. My sister, the weariness which spiritual seekers feel at this time is indeed an artifact of the changing energy at the waning of light in third density and the dawning of light in fourth density. Fourth density light more and more interpenetrates third density light, and as we said in response to an earlier query, this light is loaded with information. It is the light of love and understanding, and the burden of information that it carries is heavy. It carries more truth than third density light. It carries more truth than third density can use comfortably. This means that those who are already awake and are already seeking are now seeking under more of a strain than they might have, say, 30 or 40 years ago, even and certainly more than 100 or 200 years ago. There are truths which are inconvenient for third density entities to behold, largely having to do with the interconnectedness of all being and the unity of all being, so that the deeds done by another are the deeds done by the self. That which seems repugnant to the self, yet is done by another, somehow feels as though it has been done by the self. And this, my sister, is because there is a great deal of truth in the unity of all beings. There is no truth to saying that one entity is responsible for the choices of another. You are not guilty because someone else has committed murder. However, you are part of the tribe of humankind, and you carry the burden of the behavior and the choices of humankind. It creates of the universe a hall of mirrors for the spiritual seeker on planet Earth today, so that the seeker is bumping up against truth. And often, that truth is not what one wants to see. It is not all tied up in a pretty bow. It is not all positive. It does not seem to be fair. That is, it does not seem to be beautiful or true or just or equitable. And yet, you see all these things because you are being bombarded constantly by fourth density light. So yes, there is every reason to feel more tired than usual, to be wary with the world's heavy energies. And yet you came here to serve. This is the moment for which you sacrificed so much. Now you are here. Now you are on the ground. Now you are in the midst of the fire. And it certainly is wearying. Yet comfort yourself with the knowledge that you did not come here to fix things. You came here to love things, to love yourself, and to love those around you, to love all of the tribe of humankind, and above all, to love the Creator. Therefore, it's all right to feel weary. One feels weary at sundown, and it is truly sundown for your planet and your people. At the end of this incarnation, each of you shall walk the steps of light. This is your last incarnation upon this particular planet in this particular environment. Consequently, rejoice in your time, however wearying it may seem. You are in the place you sacrificed comfort and family and the remembrance of how things truly are, so that you could serve and to learn. And you are serving, my sister, and you are learning. And so are all of those who seek at this time. Question: I would just ask that as the harvest comes to pass in the next coming years, and the earth is completely in fourth density light, will there be a chance of seeing this tiredness lifting? Or is it likely something that will endure to the end of this incarnation? We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my sister, thanks to the one known as Jim, who enabled this instrument's ears to work. My sister, you will find this weariness to be not only permanent, but that which builds upon itself. It is not too much to carry, but it is weariness that cannot be completely renewed to lack of weariness by sleep or rest. It is an incarnational situation. Consequently, we encourage you to learn to manage it, to manage your energy, so that when you spend your energy, it is spent well. There are always strategies when one has a physical disability, for instance, where one changes one's habits in order to get the most done with the least physical movement. The same holds true for the inner world. Energy expenditure, especially when it is devoted to the energies of self-judgment, self-criticism, and a lack of self-forgiveness, are energies that are unwisely spent. Once those energies are dedicated to self-judgment and related energies, those energies are no longer free to be used for love service. Consequently, although it may seem difficult to do at first, we encourage you at all times to come from a place of being self-forgiven, in full knowledge of your worth and with no tendency towards self-criticism. It is not that we would suggest that you stop noticing when you make errors. Self-perceived errors are helpful, and mistakes are the way people learn whatever their field of study. However, it is useless to become angry at the self because one has added 2 and 2 and gotten 5. It is only necessary to note down that 2 and 2 equal 4, and to move from that premise in the future. The energy expenditures that you are called to are those of love. That is why you came, and that is why you remain. You are not yet done loving this planet and its people. Consequently, waste no time in judgment on yourself or on others, but only spend your energy on the inner planes for those purposes of dedicating all that you are and all that you have to the service of the one Creator, to being that entity of love that you intended to be when you chose to come here. Question: could you give us an example of what is enlightenment? Could you please describe the attributes of an enlightened being existing in the third density earth plane? We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my brother. We find that enlightenment is a word that is heavily used by your people, and just as with any heavily used word, the meaning of that word has become defiled and trivialized. Enlightenment in its language form has an etymology that speaks of light. When someone gets an idea in cartoons, we see in this instrument's mind the image of a light bulb going off. That is light, ideas, information. When someone is said to be enlightened, that means they feel or they have the impression that such an entity has more than his or her share of the light of information, of awareness. The enlightened ones will choose different examples for different areas of interest. To one who seeks in a spiritual sense, the enlightened being might be a religious figure or a spiritual figure such as the one known as Jesus the Christ, or a beloved minister, pastor, or priest. It might be a guru, a swami, a shaman, or a practitioner of magic. It depends upon the culture as to what is seen as spiritual and what is seen as enlightenment. To those who are fascinated with technical things, an enlightened being would be the one who understands the vast intricacies of this specialty. To physicists and mathematicians, the choice of who is enlightened might well be someone such as the one known as Albert, who was able to visualize the whole of that subject of physics, the exploration of matters at rest and matters in motion, and was able to see the whole of the discipline. To someone in the dance or performer of music or a poet, the choice of enlightened being is going to be different depending upon his sensitivities, his awareness of beauty, and his limitations of mind and insight. But in general, an enlightened being is one who is aware in an accurate and far-reaching manner of the nature of his environment, so that he is not only able to live serenely in the midst of the chaos that swims between every breath upon your planet Earth existence, but is also able to share this vision that transcends the multiplicity of detail and brings together a unified picture of how things are to others. Question: given the declared fact of the absoluteness of free will, how can it be infringed? Can you give a definition of the infringement of free will and how it would be possible to do work for someone else and infringe upon free will? We are those of Quo and are aware of your querying, my brother. My brother, the principle of free will is the first distortion of the law of one. It is a principle of ethical concern that motivates us tremendously, and we offer it as a principle which might be considered as a resource for motivating you in your ethical deliberations when you come to choice points. It is not an entitlement, it is a principle. You were given free will by virtue of being born into an atmosphere which has this heavy miasma, the veil of forgetting, in order to regain your memory of how things truly are and what the situation truly is. You cannot feel that you are one with all. You seem to be quite separate. You cannot feel that you are a creator of love. Sometimes you feel like you are, and sometimes you feel like you aren't. Yet, my brother, you are indeed a creature of love. And as a creature of love, you came into this miasma asking yourself to penetrate it enough to remember you are a creature of love and that you wish to behave as though you were, so that your energies are those of love, compassion, and forgiveness. You do not automatically give another person the benefit of free will. That is to say, you are capable as a human being of placing someone close to you in a situation where he is heavily oriented towards following your will instead of his own. In obvious cases of this, it is generally called blackmail. But that is one obvious example of how free will can be abridged. You can say, you had an indiscretion in your past life, and I'm going to tell the world about it unless you give me money. So in order to keep that indiscretion a secret, you give the other person money. Your free will has been abridged. You have been invaded, and that has occurred within third density. So what we're saying is that while you are creatures possessed of free will, you do not automatically retain free will in your workings with others, in your relationships with those about you. As to how one may do work for another person, we frequently run into that consideration as we answer queries such as this one, in groups such as this. Say a person asks us, what should I do? Should I go to Indiana or should I go to Colorado? We can, if we wish, look into the situation in Indiana, see the personnel involved, see the connections through other incarnations, see the contracts made, and see a lot of different things having to do with Indiana. We can look at Colorado and see what the situation would be there, and we would offer an opinion as to which would be a more effective move. Yet if we did so, we would be limiting the choices for that entity insofar as he obeyed us. In the most persuasive situation that we have found as members of the Confederation of Angels and Planets in the service of the Infinite Creator, we found many thousands of years ago that it was an infringement upon the free will of those of planet Earth to appear among you so that there would be no doubt as to whether or not we were real. We found that were we to allow entities to see that we were quite real, they would then perhaps consider that we were more advanced beings than they, and consequently, that they must listen to us, and in that case, we would be in the situation of those who are preachers or priests or rabbis or gurus, and who are asking people to believe them and not to do the work for themselves. And we found that we could not do that it pulled too much away from our polarity as service to others, beings. Consequently, we have not appeared in physical form in your skies for many thousands of years. We realize that others have, those who are not so nice in their choices, those who specifically want to impose their will upon those of planet Earth. However, in order to retain our positivity, we long ago chose to avoid coming among your peoples and appearing to speak from on high, as it were, so that we would eliminate the matter of free will from what people thought. For would they not be forced to believe that those who were able to ride the deep space of the cosmos as you ride airplanes, and were able to do other things that seem far beyond your abilities as human beings would be those to whom one must listen? We do not wish to put ourselves in the position of authority. We wish each entity to be his own authority, and we wish to support and encourage each entity as he becomes used to taking responsibility for himself and thinking for himself. This is the role in which we see ourselves, and in this role we find it a persuasive value to hold the free will of each person high and not to do the work for that person, but to allow enough confusion to remain surrounding a choice point for that person, that his choices are made in an authentic environment of free will. In such a way, we do honor and respect you and know that each of you shall come to blooming and fruition in good time. In another channeling in January of 2011, Jim asks, the question this evening has to do with this. When we as seekers pray that the will of the Creator or of Jesus can be done through us, how do we do this most effectively? And to what power are we giving over our will? What exactly is occurring here, and how does this affect our free will as seekers? Carla Channeling says, we are those known to you as the principle of Quo. We thank the one known as Jay for this query, and as the one known as Carla has said, it cuts to the heart of the philosophy of the law of one, shall we say, and to one's concept of how one is living one's life. Sometimes when one uses one's will to give up one's will to a higher will, one feels as though one is losing one's freedom, losing one's free will. It feels as though the personal will has been given up, and for what? The answer to that is hidden in the mystery of the one Creator. So let us look at this query more closely. In the first place, free will is a matter of perception for each person who is living in incarnation on planet Earth in third density. If the entity has had a successful indoctrination into some religions, for instance, the matter of free will has been declared null and void, and instead the child will obey each dictate and dogma of that religion, which has an answer for every situation, usually heavily couched in judgment and narrowing one's choices, so that there are prisons made of dogma, each tenet a bar. The door is locked for the entire incarnation, once such tenets are accepted. There are others who have been trained by their parents and indoctrinated into their culture in such a way that there is a prison made of enculturation. There are rules governing each action, and often these bars are as stringent as those of religion in limiting the choices of those who have chosen to obey the dictates of society without thought and without question. Fortunate are those who awaken within an incarnation to a realization that it is their right and part of their basic nature to make their own choices, to discern and evaluate the truth for themselves, and to remove themselves from any prisons made of words, the tenets of dogma, or the rules and regulations of society, which are words of imprisonment for many. Now, we are not judging religion or society for creating dogma or for creating the rules and regulations of polite social intercourse. There are some that do very well within the narrow limits of a religion or a society. It is possible to open the energy body and keep the heart open within the prison of words. It is possible to graduate from third density in these conditions. However, there is a tremendous power involved in realizing that you have the capacity and the responsibility to make your choices for yourself. Once an entity realizes that he does indeed have free will and that he can exercise it, he is then faced with the decision of how to bend his will, what to desire, and what to set the intentions to seek. There are those who have realized their free will turn to objects of desire that are within the physical illusion. This instrument was talking on a radio program and was asked about how to set an intention to get what was desired. Then this instrument discovered that the object of desire was a set of dishes, and she told the questioner that she was out of her depth because she only knew how to set her intention for spiritual goals, and that this caller was on her own when it came to dishes. We're talking about spiritual goals here to the exclusion of goals set within the illusion. Giving over one's will to the will of the infinite Creator is an act of will. Indeed, it is a very deep act of will, reaching down into the roots of consciousness, for the will is turned over to the Creator. The Creator of love, that Logos, the one original thought that created all that there is. Such a decision is the act of conscious being that is conscious of its reality and of the reality within which it dwells. That is, that it dwells in the house of the Creator on an island in space called planet Earth. It acknowledges that there is a dance between all the parts of the Creator so that they're all dancing in balance with each other, and it indicates an overwhelming desire to be part of the harmony, the reciprocity, and the balance of the dance. It seems as though it were giving away responsibility to give one's will over to the will of the Creator. Yet it is in no way a giving way of responsibility. Rather, it is a dedication of the self to the rightness, the balance, the rhythm of the dance. It is an acknowledgement that within third density, one cannot see clearly all the factors that weigh on a situation. One cannot see what the grand pattern is that lies beneath the smaller patterns. Such a choice expresses the desire to cooperate with and harmonize with that pattern to come into balance with the one infinite creation and all of its interactive parts. Free will is at its most expressive as it chooses the will of the infinite one and releases attachments to outcomes within the illusion in favor of what the mystery shall bring about in the way of deeper reconciliation and return to balance. The human will, the individual will, is powerful, very powerful. Each of you is a magical entity, an entity capable of potentially creating changes in your own consciousness by thought. It is seductive and tempting to use one's individual will, pushing against perceived reality for a desired goal. It is easy to think that one is doing one's part by willing that this perceived responsibility be completed or that service be rendered, and all of these energies are excellent. The expressing of one's desires and the setting of one's intentions are ways of experiencing the self as powerful, and this is a helpful experience. Yet, the most powerful choice, in our humble opinion, for any entity is the choice of doing the will of that agent which created all that there is, and which is aware of all those elements which shall constitute the balance point in any situation. It takes courage, in fact, to turn over the will to the infinite one, for the outcome is unknown. Those personal desires which one has may or may not be a part of the balance and rhythm of the dance that is appropriate. There is the element of perceived sacrifice. We cannot even say that such decisions create peace within the self, for the Creator's choices do not come with explanations. We appreciate the comments of the one known as G before this meditation as concerning the introduction of space or spaciousness into his experience of his own suffering. The one known as G credited the one known as Ramana in giving him the question that gave him space. That question was, who is experiencing this? It established him as a witness of that which is happening and allowed him to detach himself from the stormy waters of his catalyst. Another part of the query of the one known as J had to do with the entity to whom he was turning over his will when he prayed, "Thy will be done." Both the one known as J and this instrument were raised in the Christian church. The one known as J is a Roman Catholic and the one known as Carla is an Anglican Catholic. So these two share a heritage of thinking about the Creator in which the Creator's unity is divided into a trinity, and yet the three parts create an infinity of one. It is not an easy thing to wrap one's intellect around such a concept because it contains obvious paradoxes. How can something that is three also be one? How can something that is unified be in three parts? Many are the souls who have been able to work well with the one known as Jesus being the object of prayer. Many others have worked well with being able to relate to and use the energy of the Holy Spirit. Yet, as the one known as Jay said, when posing this question, the concept of the Creator itself was always left vague. Working within that religious system, we are unable to sharpen the focus. Yet, we may offer thoughts about who that third member of the unity of the Creator may be, for the one known as Jesus Christ, related to the infinite Creator as Papa. In the Aramaic language, Abba does not simply mean father, it means daddy or papa. It is a name of great affection and love. When the one known as Jesus Christ gave over his will to the one infinite Creator, he gave over his will to his beloved daddy. This was his perception of the Creator. We would point out that from within the religious system, the concept of a papa rather than a judgmental, stern, and distant Creator was revolutionary. This was not something that the one known as Jesus the Christ learned from his religion or his society. It was a truth of the depths of his soul. Yet there is a great truth in this relationship for all, because from the standpoint of what this instrument calls the law of one, the Creator is indeed a daddy, a near and loving father, or shall we say a parent, for there are very feminine aspects of the Creator in that the Creator birthed the stars, the planets, the suns and moons, as well as each and every particle and iota of life within the infinite creation. There was no female deity to give birth. The Creator birthed His creation in an act of combined fatherhood and motherhood. It is very convenient to think of the Creator with a sexual connotation of father or mother, yet we would suggest to you that the mystery of the Creator is both and neither. The Creator is both a father and a mother, in that the creation is the result of the attraction between free will and the essence of the Creator, which is love. When light was added to love and manifestation occurred, it was far down the line from the original thought. Manifestation is a latter choice, the choice of one who wishes to know more about who he is, and so he flings off many particles of himself and then witnesses them and their experiences to glean that which he has not yet learned about himself. So the Creator does the reciprocal thing of saying, "Not my will, but thine," as he gives each entity within the creation free will. He is not going to tell them what to do. He's going to find out what they desire and how they experience those desires. He cannot do that by governing them, yet when he is asked, "Thy will be done," he moves according to that which tends toward the lessening of distortion and the restoration of balance. The mystery deepens because there are many levels upon which balance can occur, so that one could never predict accurately where balance lies, where wisdom lies, where the highest and best expression of love lies. Third density is by its very nature a strongly sexual density, in that sexuality is one of the primary ways that people experience the otherness of their dynamic opposite. Male and female are two poles of a very important dynamic. The energies of masculinity are those of reaching on an archetypal level, and those of the feminine are the personification of that which awaits the reaching. Therefore, the male entity experiences a good deal of aggression and inception. There is the urge to begin things. The female, in experiencing that attraction between men and women, often finds herself yielding to that aggression and being delighted to do so. It is not enough remembered, however, that each entity carries within itself, whether biologically male or biologically female, both energies. And again, it is well to consider how balanced an entity one is. If male, does one have a balance of feminine energy to soften the aggression? If female, does one have the ability to make decisions and strike out for oneself along the lines desired, as well as the ability to cooperate and to give away? When this is considered, it may be easy to see why so many relate to the Holy Spirit as the feminine aspect of the infinite Creator. We would suggest that it might be more productive to consider the three pillars of the tree of life, with the Creator principle being that side which is considered male, Jesus being that energy which is considered female, and the Holy Spirit as that energy which is the middle pillar. For the Holy Spirit's essence is the energy of Jesus that was left behind on the inner planes when the one known as Jesus departed from the outer planes, so that the energy of the one known as Jesus the Christ, that fructified love, would always be available until the end of third density. There is no right way to relate to these entities. It is just as useful to the seeker to relate in one way as another. We encourage each to follow the experiences of the heart and to relate in a completely individual way, not the way others relate, but the way that you have found it helpful to relate. Therefore, whether you're turning your will over to Daddy or to Jesus the Christ or to the Holy Spirit, Sophia, as some call her, it makes no difference, for the intention in all three ways of saying "Thy will be done." It is the same. There is that hunger and thirst for the most balanced situation possible to flow, and the willingness to cooperate when the stage is set and it is discovered what the cues are, what the situation is, and what the love is in the moment that can be found and shared. Whether you think of the Creator, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or some creator entity of your own understanding does not matter. It is the intention to maximize your service and your devotion that are the central and pivotal energies in this seeming giving over the will. In actuality, is the crown of free will choices to choose the Creator's way. It is the same energy that causes people sometimes to take off their watches and say, "This is now God's time." It is the releasing of the self from the minutes and the hours that frees time from its prison. And it is the releasing of the will from the lesser goals of a worldly and illusory nature, and the releasing of them into the mystery that enhances to the highest point possible one's freedom to choose. The mystery of free will shall never be made clear. The paradox of using one's free will to give up one's free will shall never be elucidated, and therefore questions will always continue to be asked in all humility and puzzlement as to how this works. The peace that passeth understanding, however, does stem from the faith one has that it is possible to tabernacle with the Infinite One in such a way that the Infinite One can maximize balance through you. We commend you to each to ponder this point. We ask each person to reckon with his own power. What is the right use of power, my friends? How shall you bend your will? How shall you as co-creator create your universe? How shall you rule it? Shall it be a creation of love or a creation of judgment? These matters are in your hands and yours alone. Go forth, therefore, and seek to serve. We hope that our humble comments have been some aid to you in thinking about this query and would ask if there's a follow-up question. Question, quote, this is a question I have. Could you define the difference between emotional and spiritual pain? We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my sister. The human entity has three components: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Physical pain is obvious, that of the physical body. Mental emotional pain is still that which involves the mind or intellect, and the emotions which are instinctually those of third density humans. And spiritual pain is that pain which is involved in the spiritual complex as it is activated by the individual. Often a mental or an emotional pain will strike so deeply that it feels as though it is striking to the very soul, and most of the suffering of humankind is of this mental emotional nature. Purely spiritual pain is quite rare, and yet it does occur. There are those who ache for lack of connection to the essence of their spiritual selves. It is as though such an entity is attempting to make a connection and is unable to do so. However, the vast majority of entities' suffering is experienced in the mind and emotions. Question: when I ask for guidance, Quo, does that imply I have a particular outcome in mind in third density? I'm still caught in the third density experience compared with what you talked about, which was surrendering completely and being at peace with whatever experience brings. Can you comment on that? We are those of Quo and we perceive a query. If we are incorrect, we would ask the one known as R to repeat this query. There is indeed a difference between asking for guidance and the releasing of the will so that the Creator's will may be done. Both are positive and loving actions. It is your way to ask for help and to ask for guidance, and we are aware that you have found it to be, in its way, quite effective in your experience many times. The asking for guidance can be looked at in a couple of ways. First, one may ask oneself, what is the highest and best action I can take at this time? What is my highest and best self's choice? You're asking, in effect, your higher self to weigh in with some hint or inkling of what would be the choice of paths of service for the best you that there ever could be. Another way of looking at asking for guidance is an extension of asking your friends for guidance, those in the physical illusion with you, and simply extending your field of request to include the unseen realms. One way of thinking about asking for guidance is a more direct remembrance of that oneness of all creation. The other is a way of reaching out to the help that is always available, which implies others within your creation, and not simply the self and other selves that are the same as you. Whichever way of thinking about your guidance system that is helpful is the one we would encourage you to follow. For some, it is very comforting to think that the higher self, the best you that could possibly be, will offer the unified answer. For others, it is much more comforting to feel that there are allies all around, those who truly want to help you. Both ways of thinking about guidance are the truth. Again, when you find paradox, when you find mystery, you may be assured that you are on the right track, for things of the Spirit are consistently and always going to include those elements, for they break the bonds of linear thought and bring in the qualities of infinity and eternity. Question: I will ask about the difference between asking for guidance, which implies using the will in the third density, and surrendering to the Infinite One, which to me implies not using the will, and just basically being and giving up and on doing. I cannot wrap my mind around the difference, but there seems to be a difference. We are those of Quo. We believe we understand your query, my brother. The difference between asking for guidance and surrendering the will to the Infinite One is a matter of degree. It is a matter of that which is given to you and the appropriate response to that which is given to you. If it is given to you that to give up your will to the Infinite One is a releasing of your will and an abrogation of your will, then it is not for you to give up your will. Those who turn their will to the Infinite One are those who have experienced the results of powering through a desired outcome until it occurs enough times to discover that one is not necessarily in possession of enough facts to successfully choose rightly. Consequently, to those who are given this experience and this attitude, it comes to them to choose freely to do the will of the Infinite One, who has more information and who can see that which cannot be seen by the human eye. In both cases, there is the desire to serve, there is the desire to be of a positive polarity, and there is the desire to ask for help. For the one who has not yet come to the conclusion that the human will is often inadequate to know the appropriate outcome, the asking for help with choosing an outcome is that appropriate request. To those who have experienced the feeling of dissatisfaction with being attached to an outcome, after having used the technique of choosing an outcome and moving towards it, it is appropriate to turn the will to the Infinite One, not as a losing of the will, but as a capital of the crown of the active will. One must act according to one's lights, according to one's feelings, and my brother, as long as you feel that you are wise enough to press towards a desired outcome, we greatly encourage that you do what you do at this time, and that is to ask for help in seeing the situation more clearly. There is, as we said, a difference not in kind but in degree between those two choices. It is not the choice between taking responsibility and yielding responsibility. It is the choice between trusting that outcome to which you are attached is good and not trusting that the outcome to which you are attached is good. Indeed, it can also be compared to those who are right-brained and those who are left-brained, or those who are artists and work from an appreciation of beauty, and those who are people of intellect and work from an appreciation of logic and linear thought. Either path is a path of service to others and of positive polarity. There is no choice between them. It is simply a matter of who you are, what your life experiences are, and where you find yourself spiritually speaking at a particular moment. There is no best way. There is only that way that is appropriate for you and that feels resonant to you in this present moment. Thank you for what you have said. That is good food for thought, and I appreciate it. We also, my brother, thank you for you give us much food for thought also. We are those of Quo, and we find that this instrument begins to tire. Consequently, it is time for us to relinquish our connection with this instrument. We leave this instrument and this group glorifying in the love and in the light, the peace and the power of the one infinite creator. We are known to you as the principle of Quo. Adonai, my friends. Adonai Vasu Borogas. This concludes this collection of channelings, which really focused on the will, free will, and how it works. It's a very important spiritual question. Edgar Cayce says this all the time. We say it when we are reading the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done. And oftentimes I will pray, just let your will be done, God. Let your will be done. And it's also a very freeing feeling when I pray that way. I pray that I want this thing to happen, but I want the best thing to happen. I want to take the best actions. And so sometimes in my dogma, in my limited experience, I think one particular outcome is what I want. But in actuality, later on, I find out it's not. So letting go of attaching myself to a certain outcome and attaching myself to certain actions has been a powerful realization. By simply saying, I want your will to be done, God. And sometimes I want things to be done. By adding that into my affirmations, God's will be done, those affirmations seem to be more effective as well. The will is an important consideration. We have our will. It can be abrogated. It can be taken away. And we can take away other people's free will as well. It's obviously a very important consideration for spiritual questions like this. I would love to know what you think about it and how you address your will, and do you ask the Lord that his will be done, and in what way do you do it? And then once you have that sort of prayer, what does that mean for you? Do you let go, or do you have insights and intuition that inspires you to do certain things? Are those inspirations the will of God? What does it mean? It's an important question, and it's part of that spiritual journey that we're learning how to speak within, to understand our inner motivations, and to communicate with that inner spirit that we have within us. In any case, you can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. check out the description. There's a playlist of Quo channelings, and there's so much more material available. Quo is amazing, and I come back to it very often. And thank you so much. I just want to send out my love and light to everyone that's listening and tell you how much of an honor it is that you sit and listen to me go over this stuff. It means so much to me. So thank you so much. And welcome to the Reality Revolution.